Welcome to the Impulse Spotlight, a podcast for product development professionals. In this episode, we meet with a new product development engineer at Proform Custom Packaging, who has an extensive history in product design and manufacturing. Our guest has had the opportunity to work in several industries, including consumer products, medical, architectural, automotive, and even exercise equipment. In his free time, he likes to spend time outdoors with his wife of 37 years, 2 adult children, and 3 grandchildren. Kevin Ackeret grew up in a small town in southern Indiana where he began his career cutting steel as a tool and die maker in the early 80s and instantly found his passion for design and machining. After a decade working as an engineer and CNC programmer, Kevin moved into a role as a design engineer and has almost 35 years of experience working closely with both design and manufacturing teams. Kevin's most recent venture has brought him into the world of product packaging, introducing a whole new realm of challenges to his ever-expanding portfolio. In today's episode, we begin by discussing the Centurion Rack Repair System, a robust pallet rack product that is modular by design to allow for a plethora of configurations based on the repair requirements. Kevin designed this system from the bottom up for SpaceGuard Products and provides insight into the design, testing, and manufacturing processes involved in bringing that product to market. For the second half of the show, we learn more about packaging design. Kevin outlines the design practices used to design packaging, the consideration packaging designers have for the customer experience, and emerging trends with industrial design to allow for smooth and fast online collaboration between engineers. Kevin provides a very unique perspective and stands as a shining example for anyone looking to get into the industry. Let's get into it. Hey, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Troy, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So I always start out by telling everybody that I started Impulse actually almost 26 years ago. I worked for a company before that had all kinds of product development services under one roof. Kind of got my master's degree in product development, if you will, working there, and then went off and started Impulse. How did you get started in product development?
So my road was a little bit different than yours. I was working in the grocery store back in the early 80s and was dating a girl, and her dad's best friend owned a tool and die shop. So we're having a dinner one evening. He's like, "Hey, what are you going to do with your life?" And I was thinking, I don't know. And he's like, "I just built a new tool and die shop. Why don't you come to work for me?" So I got really excited about it. I thought, man, a tool and die maker, this is going to be awesome. So I went in and I was making a decent amount of money at the grocery store. So walked in, he's like, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to have to invest a lot of time in you so I can pay you $4 an hour. But he said, the sky is the limit if you can grasp this." So I said, "I'm in." So I went in, started squaring up steel, and then from there moved into CNC machining and thought, man, this is what I was made to do. And, in school, I didn't really understand trigonometry and geometry. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I didn't have a need for it. But when I got in the tool shop and I started having to trig out angles and I was writing CNC programs by hand, all of a sudden it's like, man, I wish they would have taught me this in school. So that's kind of how I got into it, building, cutting steel and being intrigued by, how plastic parts were made.
Yeah, so we're going to get into a product that you want to talk about today, but fill in a little bit of the gap there between tool and die to you actually developed a product.
Okay, so after when I got involved in tool and die, my job was to take a 2D part print or a blueprint back then, and then reverse engineer to create electrodes and so on to burn apart. Well, then the CNC technology came on, so then I started doing a lot of CNC programming. I started drawing 3-dimensional parts, and then from there, that was before CAD was as strong as it is now. So everything, if we're going to machine it 3-dimensionally, we needed to have good 3D databases. So that moved me into Creo. You probably remember those days back when it was Pro Engineer.
Yeah.
And I started on the purple Barney box. And you could rotate a part and you could shade it, but you couldn't rotate and shade it at the same time. And so we started doing 3D modeling and I started doing a lot of automotive headlights. And then from there, I was offered a job at Valley, Sylvania. So I went there and I was a senior engineer doing composite headlamp layups. I did the 99 Ford Mustang, Mark 8 Lincoln, several of those vehicles. And after a few years, I had an opportunity to start my own business. And I believe that you and I were competitors there for a few years.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you did mine as well. But anyway, so I got into that. Had a good team of designers, industrial engineers, industrial designers. We did infant car seats, consumer products, all different types of products. So did that for a long time, and then when the economy slowed down, a lot of the tool shops folded up, a lot of stuff went to China. I sold off my equipment and I went to work for H&I Corporation, which is Han Furniture, basically, for their Paoli furniture division, and got into furniture design, senior engineer there, moved into product business development. I managed the case good lines for them, conference tables. From there, I moved off into cutlery, designing scissors and cutlery, and was on a team that designed and built and manufactured a 7-axis knife sharpening system. So
Very
that
cool.
that was interesting. And from there, I got off into metal fabrication, which involves a product that we're going to talk about later. And then after I left that, I'm currently in packaging. So the cool thing about it, I've been blessed to be able to see how a part goes into a piece of steel, how to get that part out of there. What does it look like to develop furniture? What does it look like to manufacture? And then what I would call the end of my career, getting into packaging. And I'm wondering now why I didn't understand packaging on the front end, because now it seems to be such a crucial part of the whole process. If you develop a product and you put it in a box and the right amount doesn't fit across the back of a semi or across the length, they're kind of in a mess. So that's kind of just a quick rundown of start to finish. And
No, that's awesome. That's some great experience. So yeah, before we'll get into the packaging a little bit, but let's talk about the product that you want to talk about today.
So the product I'm going to talk about today is a product that's called Centurion Rack Repair, and I believe I shared an image with you. If you want to share that, you can, or if not, that's fine too. So the reason I picked that product was because we started out with just a basic concept, and the owner of SpaceGuard Products laid out a vision, and he says, "Hey, I want to get into the rack repair market." He was currently producing caging, securing areas, and stuff like that. So he laid out a few sketches on the board and said, "Hey, I want a product that basically, when you go into a warehouse and you have a pallet rack, he wants to go in, and if you got a damaged leg, he wants to take that leg out, replace it with something that is equally as strong as what you took out." So it sounds pretty simple. Pallet racks are all pretty standard until you get into them. And this is what I like about the whole design and engineering process, and I'm sure you can attest to this as well. You never know where you're going to end up at. You have a start and you have an end goal, but the journey in which you take it and all that you learn about that industry is what excites me, because you uncover all these little interesting facts about the product line. So in the pallet rack industry, there's roll form rack, there's structural rack. Everybody has their own way they do things, their hole spreads, how their cuff mounts up. And then you have to look at, how's the customer getting in this rack system? Do they have a pallet rack cross member at the bottom? How far up does it go? So basically, at the end of the day, we created a product that would allow you to cut a leg off at any height from 16 inches on up. And basically, we go in there, cut that leg off, put in a repair kit, and sometimes this can be done in as little as 30 minutes. So in that particular product line, I laid out the basic concept, which was on a 3-inch column. And then with SolidWorks, which you're familiar with, I did a configuration file on that. So I managed about 144 different variations of
Oh, wow.
that at one time of that product, all through a configuration. Of course, then I worked with my maintenance team who reported to me at that time to go out to plasma table, cut these components, bend them, fabricate them, and then the team would go out, install one, come back with the feedback, what we do right, what we do wrong. And then over a period of about 8 months, that product was fully developed and launched, and it's being well received in the marketplace. It's a lot of fun. And of course, me being the only person there driving 3D solid modeling, and this is why it's kind of one of my favorites. I lay down every line on that whole product.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else like it on the market? Like, is there any competitive?
There are some other competitors. Nobody does it quite like we do, or SpaceGuard does. Their product is so modular that no matter what you come up against, you're able to solve your problem. And the other cool thing about it was you've got to be able to support whatever that rack was originally supporting. So at the end of the day, we sent this off to seismic to make sure that we're seismic approved, had all the structural engineering tests on it. So it was probably the first product that I actually worked on that, I laid that initial line all the way through, working with the maintenance team, Jim Cook, Jay Thompson, those guys, got to give them a shout out. They're the guys that built it and installed it. And then my industrial engineer, Madison Nelson, she, had to put it all into an ERP system because at the end of the day, how are you going to get this item from a customer request into your system out the back door, get it shipped on site? So that was the interesting part of it as well.
Did the end customer do the replacement, or was that something you guys did as well? You fabricated this
So
and did replacement.
So the end customer can. So they have the way they're set up now is you can be certified. So his team will come out, certify you, and then you're certified to install. The other cool thing about that as well is we, at the volume that we were going to sell these, we weren't going to be able to manually weld them. So we brought in robotic welders, which kind of goes back, like we were talking earlier about when you design products, how are you going to produce them? How do you need to hold these things? How are you going to nest them? So, I'm sure, you're the same way. You look at parts and you think, well, what's this feature on here? What does it do or whatever? A lot of times as designers and engineers, we put a little nicks and holes and features to allow these parts to be nested. So currently these parts are all welded on robotic tables. That way, you get the same product every day, day in and day out, because the robot does the same thing all the time.
Sure, sure. When you were designing this, were there any like novel technologies or methodologies or anything like that you kind of discovered as you guys were developing it?
I wouldn't. No, not really. I think what really stumped me was the amount of variation across the industry. It seems like a pretty standard industry, right? Until you get into it, and it's like, well, this guy's a 30-second here, and the other guy, he's a 30-second up and over, and then trying to make something that's going to be rigid and solid with a target that you can't tie down. So, and I think that's where, as designers and engineers, that's part of the discovery process that we run into is how do I capture this animal and how do I make it to where I can produce this day in and day out? So at the end of the day, the customer gets a product that goes in fairly easily.
Sure, sure. So at Impulse, we've helped design literally thousands of parts or products, I guess. Some of them just parts, but and every one of those journeys is a little bit different. Can you kind of walk us through the journey of designing and developing this, I guess, system?
Yeah, so first off, we start out with we walk up the shop, we say, hey, here's a pallet rack, right? What are the dimensions? And then of course after you get those dimensions, you start looking at, well, how do I need to support it? what's the bracing need to look like. And then, like I said, we had a plasma table, so like, well, how are we going to be able to produce this thing to the quality that we need? And just every little avenue and corner you turn around, you continuously open up new discoveries. But at the end of the day, you look back at the product and you think, oh yeah, it looks pretty simple, right? But as you can probably attest to as well, that whole discovery process is just exciting to me.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. What was the timeline like start to finish?
So start to finish, and I was trying to nail that down, looking back to the old images because I'm not with SpaceGuard anymore, but have a great amount of respect for the team there. From start to finish, from initial concept all the way through to shipping out the door and a quality product, I believe was inside of about 7-8 months.
Oh,
We,
wow.
we, we were kicking parts early. I mean, we literally took a sketch, and I drew up a part. We went out and hard welded a part in a matter of 30 minutes. Oh, we're there,
Sure.
right? and as a designer and an engineer, I always get I almost get tickled when I look back through a project and you look at your first concepts when you thought you nailed it. And then
Yeah.
you look at it at the end of the day, boy, was I naive. And I
Yeah.
remember one time, this is off the subject here on another product. I flew with my team to Dallas, Texas one time, and we were going to design this revolutionary cat litter box. It had skylights in it, automatic rake, and everything. So I was young and naive, and I signed up for the deal, and I jumped back on the plane with my team, and they said, "How are we going to do it?" And I said, I don't know. We'll figure it out." And I'm sure you do that as well.
Yeah.
You know that the interesting components are going to reveal themselves. You don't understand right now how it's going to happen, but you know that over time, that given enough time, enough money, and the opportunity, that you can solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned, when you're young, you just kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to knock this out. First concept's going to be it. I've gotten into the habit whenever I hire anybody new, of course, they're usually young and, full of energy and they're like, well, why don't we just do this? I'm like, model it up.
Yeah.
Model it up. And 15 minutes later, they're like, that's not going to work. I'm like, I know, but now you know.
Don't you love it when I don't know if you spend much time in manufacturing, but I was at heart, I create stuff and I draw stuff digitally, but I've always been involved in the manufacturing side of it. So even now, I drive 5-axis CNC machines. I'm driving routers. I'm driving CNC equipment. But it always amazes me. You get a plastic part and it's ready to go, right? And they need this thing in 6 weeks so they can produce it. So you ask the engineer, the designer, you say, "Hey, what's your die pull on this mold?" And he's like, "I never really thought about that." It's like, that's the first thing you think about
Yeah.
is how is this thing going to come out of a tool, right?
Yeah.
So when I was a Valio, you're designing on a vehicle, maybe on a turn signal or a tail light, side marker, and you're working out here on the car, but at the end of the day, this thing has to open up in a mold like this, right?
Hmm.
And I think I've been really blessed to be able to cover all these different genres, and then at the end of the day, realize, hey, I got to be able to produce this thing. I think that's the key.
Sure. Sure. A minute ago, you talked about like you had a bunch of configurations. Do you remember a number that you had?
I'm thinking at one time I had about I don't know. So this thing travels several different inches based on the main tube.
Hmm.
So then we've got different types of like teardrop cutouts. We've got structural hole cutouts, and then we've got for every different style of pallet rack out there, there's a different set of hardware
Okay.
depending on if you're using a 3, 4, or 5 inch column, and if it's structural or if it's teardrop. And then that changes your cuff size, which is the part that actually hooks onto the column. So you've got just a plethora of hardware configurations, sheet metal configurations, tube configurations. So, for example, if you're doing in the roll form repair, you might be using an 1/8 inch wall section, but in the structural, you might be using a 3/16. So right there is a whole plethora of configurations right there. And then we change the whole pattern. We change, where the maybe the whole spacing. But I think there's probably 100, and I'm guessing 144 different configurations. And so drove that all out of one file. And then, in SolidWorks, I named all my drawing tabs based on what the part number was. So then I created a macro in SolidWorks that I could basically drag up to my command bar, and it would kick out all of these drawings based on their drawing tab name. And then we would feed those into the ERP system. So it was a pretty seamless integration. It's one thing to just draw a part up and make it. But it's another thing to get that thing to where you can actually put it on a form where somebody can order it. And be sure what they got. For me, the most exciting part of the whole design process, I love that initial phase when you're laying out the concept. You throw a little paint on in a rendering package. I love that marketing side of it, and I could totally live there. But at the end of the day, what good is a part with some paint on it if you can't produce it, right?
Yeah. No, that's interesting about the configurations. That was kind of why I was digging at it. I didn't know if it was you were just doing different, I guess, lengths depending on where the damage was, but it sounds like you have to accommodate all of the different rack designs, which, again, me walking into a warehouse, I assume there's one, but I'm sure there are dozens of different shapes and sizes. And
that's kind of what I thought too originally, and then so to make it efficient, you want to be able to have this line card, if you will, that has a complete portfolio of anything that you need. It's like going in and buying a socket set. You could buy an adjustable wrench, but you want something a little more custom, so you buy a box-in wrench, right? That comes in all different sizes. And I would encourage any of the listeners, if you're using SolidWorks, you don't understand configurations are your best friend. And a lot of times I use configurations as a way to change a part. So maybe I'm doing a coaster for a coffee cup, and I got 5 different size coffee cups. So I configure the diameter of that. Maybe I can configure the thickness of it. But I also use configurations as a sketchboard. So I've got a design that's developed, and then I want to run off on a different tangent to see, hey, will this fly? So I just start a configuration, start putting holes in it, changing the shape, changing the dimensions. So with a configuration, you can change anything within that CAD model, whether it be the color, which is kind of trivial, all the way down to turn holes on and off, change the dimensions of something, and every design that I do will have at least 3 or 4 different configurations on it.
Sure. So, excuse me, before we kind of shift gears and get into packaging, with all the products we've helped design, there's always some kind of challenge that comes up. What was the biggest challenge you had in developing this product?
I think the biggest challenge I had there was probably just digesting all of the potential variations across the system. Because when I first walked into it and laid out, I'm thinking, this is pretty simple. A pallet rack's a pallet rack, right?
Yeah.
And then the other challenge was making sure that once this thing was developed, that when it went to the structural engineer to pass seismic testing, that it would meet or exceed the approval. And when we submitted, there were no changes. So we know that. Of course, within SolidWorks, there are some tools to kind of test it. But at the end of the day, you need a PE to look at it in depth, because in that particular market, you could have a nice part, it could look good, you could have it all configured right in your ERP system. But if this thing goes out to the field and you can't you can't meet seismic approval, because a lot of the places where these go into are seismic approved, and these racking systems have to have a seismic stamp on them. The little things about, how far do you put your holes in the concrete? Are they 3 inches, they 4.5, they 5 inches? Where do they need to be so they meet seismic approval? So there was just like around every corner there was something you had to overcome.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's switch gears a little bit. What are you up to these days?
So my days now are the type of modeling that I do now is I would say in some senses it's a little simpler. So I'm cutting corrugate. I've been taught that you don't call it cardboard; it is corrugate. And we do plastic dunnage. So an automotive customer needs to transport 15 parts from point A to point B to be painted or assembled or whatever. So I'm taking a plastic part or a metal part, basically shrink wrapping that, offsetting it, sucking that down into a piece of plastic, creating an offset of it, cutting a wood mold, sucking a sheet of plastic down over it. Once that's approved, then we'll send it off to a foundry to have a cast pattern built off of that. So that's the dunnage side of it. The other side is, we've all received a package in the mail. We open up the top of the box, and boom, there's a layer of foam in there. So somebody like myself looks at that part and says, "Hey, here's what this thing needs to be able to get from point A to point B. Where the impact point's going to be on this box." And the interesting thing about packaging is everybody wants their part to arrive to you in a good manner and all intact. But typically, by the time you get to packaging, the budget's blown. All the money has been spent on R&D and marketing, and nobody wants to pay anything for packaging. So it's a commodity. But if you look at the markets and the overall economy, you can base the health of the economy on what the packaging companies are doing, because everything travels in some type of a box. So that's kind of my game now, and I believe that all business is show business. No matter what you're designing or developing, at the end of the day, you need a good customer feeling. And it's a little frustrating when that product comes to your home, you pop it open, and it looks like it just snowed in your office or your home. So thinking about, what's that package look like? How do we minimize foam scatter? And I always preach that if your product goes to your customer and the box looks bad, it's painful digging into that box, trying to find the components. By the time he gets to the bottom and starts assembling it, his frustration level is almost through the roof. And if something doesn't turn him around, there's a good chance he's going to take that box back up, ship it back to Amazon, and just forget the whole experience. So as a package designer, what I'll do now is I just finished up a product that you open up the box, boom, there it is. The pamphlets in top tells who I am as a customer. Business card down here tells who your contact is if you have a problem. And then you unveil the next layer. You get to see the meat of the product. Here it is. This is what I bought. This is what I spent my hard-earned money on. And so I want that experience to be very pleasant all the way down to the bottom. And that's probably when I'm going to dump the nitty-gritty hardware and stuff like that on you, because at this point I've set hook, line, and sinker, right? So at this point you bought into the system. I think that if you open up a box and foam scatters all over your room, and you got all your complex stuff in there, and you've got directions that you've mirrored apart, and you even mirrored your text, so everything's backwards. The customer, he's having a bad experience. So, and I always talk to my guys about like the Apple box. I get an Apple phone, I still have my boxes. Why? Because that box is nice. It feels good. So I think it's all the customer experience has to be sweet.
Do you guys get into that level of package design, like an Apple type, clean, white box, or is it all corrugate that's not
No,
coated?
no, we do the whole thing. We've done some really cool things. We've done some things that are actually packed in like a nano case. So we've taken like you have a product. Let's say it's maybe it's a microscope, maybe it's a consumer product. It's somebody, maybe it's a handgun that somebody is selling you a case for. So we actually have a partnership with Nanook, so we can take their case, put foam in it, color layer it. So we do some really high end cosmetic stuff, and we also just do the standard 1.7 pound black PE foam, just jammed in a
Okay,
box with cardboard around it or corrugate around it. Yeah.
interesting. What what should somebody that is designing a product think about? I know you're going to tell them they need to think about packaging first, but what should they think about with regards to that? Like educate them a little bit.
Well, I think if you're designing a product, you need to be thinking about, at the end of the day, how is my customer going to receive this product? Is it going to be bulk packed? Is it going to have a package that, I'm looking at my Bose speaker that I'm talking to you through. It came in a real nice Bose box, labeled, pulled out, nice sleeve, nice instructions. But it goes a little further beyond that, because when you're thinking about packaging that, am I going to be in a facility that has robotic integration? Does this part that I'm making, does it need a feature so that a robot can grab this? How am I going to nest this part? So maybe the part, maybe you could put maybe you could put a 1 inch fillet on all four corners of your part, but maybe this component needs to be positioned in a certain way for the user to interact with it. So maybe I change the geometry a little bit. And as an industrial designer, you have a lot of freedom on the front end, and you can style that in however you want. And then the next big thing comes in, back on let's say that we're doing the Bose speaker, and it's a 4x6. Well, how many can I get in the box? Well, I can get 12 of them in a box. Well, what's that stack look like? And I throw these in a semi. Oh, wait a minute, I've got a 8 inch void all the way down the side of this truck. That stuff's going to slide around. So I
Hmm.
think I was thinking about, we did some dog houses one time, an igloo shaped dog house that, we worked on the corrugate, we worked on the plastic part design, and that dog house is the exact dimensions. So they stack up to the exact number across a semi truck width and the depth. So there's not a quarter of an inch of space inside that semi trailer, which that just maximizes the whole process all the way around.
Sure, sure. So shifting gears one more time as we kind of start to wrap up, what are some of the trends like in your corner of the product development world? What are some of the trends you're seeing emerge?
So I think the biggest trend that I'm excited about is the availability of online collaboration. I know that SolidWorks CATIA, and I'm out kind of out of the CATIA world right now, but in the UG world. But I'm really excited about the ability to, once something is designed or in the conceptual phase, I can post this out on the 3D board. So like with you as a contract designer, you can share your design with your team worldwide. So then I'm sitting here working on something, somebody's just looking through a design, they mark it up. I get feedback immediately on my screen that says, hey, Joe, he's got a suggested change. I can pull that up, link into him, and I'm thinking, back when, and I got out of business in 2015, and I look at how the online community and how the internet has grown up just since 2015. I mean, you look back 2010, 11, and 12, trying to have a video conference, trying to share models back and forth. I mean, it was lethargic. Where
We were
now
still
you can,
getting airplanes back
oh,
then.
what's that?
It was easier to get into a plane back then and
It,
just
it
fly to the
was. In
start.
fact, I was doing work with a company up in Wisconsin, and I hired a guy that would pick me up at the Seymour Airport, and he would fly me to Wisconsin with two other guys. We'd spend the day up there and fly back home
Yeah.
because trying to convey that. But nowadays with the 3D modeling tools, the ability with 3D printing, 3D printers are affordable enough that you can have one in your office. It's pretty simple. So I think the technology you can see it reflected in parts. The detail that goes into parts that we buy now, the accuracy that goes into them, the ability to 3D scan. If you want to make a change, you can clay something up, 3D scan it, and then right back into modeling. So I think the time to market's got a lot shorter,
Hmm.
and I think the accuracy is a lot better than what it used to be, obviously.
Sure, sure. So you've got quite a bit of experience. So reflecting on all the challenges and successes that you've encountered developing products, what kind of words of wisdom would you share with somebody looking to make a significant impact in the product development world?
I think at the end of the day, I think first of all, for me, I'm a man of faith, and I thank God for the talents that He's given me. So I look at product development and the product design cycle as I'm really into building people, and product design is just the way that I do it. So
Hmm.
I would say that if you can get on the design team, learn how to work together. There's never any dumb questions. Be open to your peers. So when I had Ackeret Engineering, just to kind of give you a snippet of my team, I had one guy that was a Purdue graduate that was a mechanical engineer. I had a guy that was an aeronautical engineer out of Texas A&M. So those are quite a bit different, right?
Hmm.
So we would sit, and then you got me. I'm not college educated. I took a lot of classes, but never declared a degree. So we all get into a room and we start banging stuff out, which I would call the adrenaline room. In the adrenaline room, we can beat each other up. We can ask questions, but nobody gets offended. And then we come out of that, and I think the key is realizing that you can learn from anybody. You can learn from the janitor all the way up to the CEO. Everybody has something to offer because we've all taken a different path, and we have a different set of paradigms that have shaped us into who we are.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. Awesome. This has been great. Is there anything else in regards to the product we talked about, or packaging, or product development in general that you want to mention?
No, I don't think so. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sure if I watch this later, I'll think
Yeah,
about
you
you.
probably should have said that. Yeah, yeah.
It just, it kind of go back to the start. One thing I missed on is, I grew up in a small town, Crosville, Indiana. I kind of joke sometimes about where I ranked out my class when people are bragging about where they ranked at. And of course, I ranked, at a certain percentage, but the class was real small, right? But so kind of give you an idea of the size of school that I went to. It was small, not a lot of opportunities. We didn't have computers, didn't have a design class, and I had no idea that the kind of work that you and I do ever existed until I
Yeah.
got into the tool and die trade. And I think, man, it's just really a blessing that I was able to somehow find this trade and flourish in it.
Yeah, yeah. That, that's awesome. Before we wrap up, is there that product still exists, right? They're still making that and selling it?
The Centurion?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's fairly new actually.
Where could somebody see it online? Do you know?
So they could
If they
go
don't-
look for Centurion Rack Repair.
Okay.
and you'll find it there. And there's there's a whole portfolio of products. Yeah, it's a nice product line.
Okay. And what
And
about your packaging company? Where can they find stuff?
so the Centurion is built right here in Seymour, Indiana. If you head
Okay.
down Highway 50, right across from the Walmart distribution, you'll see SpaceGuard Products. And then I currently work for Proform Custom Packaging, and we're
Okay.
just south of Columbus. And we do everything, like say, from plastic dunnage. We do wood crating. Basically, when you think of Proform, anything that you need to get from point A to point B, no matter what the container looks like, we wrap stuff around it. So we do a lot of different types of products,
Cool.
custom
Cool. I'll
packaging.
make sure I put links to both of those in the notes so people can go take a look.
Yeah.
Cool. I appreciate you doing this, Kevin.
All right. Have a good day, Troy. We'll see you around.
To learn more about Impulse and how we might be able to help you, visit impulseproductdevelopment.com.